Jake Running Wolf crouched in the tall grass on the hillside above New Angeles and watched the sky through his enhanced binoculars. For 3 days, the orbital sensors had detected strange readings at the edge of the solar system, but Governor Hamilton continued to insist they were just cosmic radiation. Lisa Martinez lay beside him with her own scanning equipment focused on the upper atmosphere. Her leg had healed enough to allow limited movement, but she still walked with a slight limp. She had refused to stay in the safety of the hidden villages and insisted on being present when their enemies arrived. "Energy signatures are getting stronger," she whispered. "Whatever is coming, it is much larger than anything in our databases." The native settlements across New Terra had spent the past week transforming themselves into invisible fortresses. Using traditional camouflage techniques enhanced with modern holographic projectors, entire villages had simply vanished from satellite view. Weapons caches were hidden in natural caves, and communication networks were buried deep underground, where alien scanners could not detect them. Billystones, engineering teams had worked around the clock to create hybrid weapons that combined ancient designs with plasma technology. Cherokee arrowheads now contained microfusion cores that could penetrate any armor. Lakota war lances were equipped with targeting computers and energy amplifiers. Comanche tomahawks could cut through alien biometal like it was soft wood. Most importantly, Lisa had helped Joe Yazzie develop a biological weapon that would specifically target Corvani physiology. Using toxins extracted from plants that had co-evolved with human agricultural systems, they created a compound that would cause alien bioarmor to break down at the molecular level. "There," Lisa said, pointing at a spot in the morning sky where the stars seemed to shimmer. "Something is bending light around itself." Jake activated his communication device and sent a coded message to all native settlements. 3 clicks meant the enemy was arriving. 5 clicks meant prepare for battle. 7 clicks meant may the spirits of our ancestors guide our weapons. The shimmering in the sky grew larger and more pronounced until everyone in New Angeles could see it with naked eyes. Governor Hamilton had finally authorized a planetary emergency alert, but it was too late for proper evacuations. The Corvani had arrived exactly as their intelligence data predicted. The first bioship materialized like a living nightmare, made of bone and coral. It was easily a mile long and covered with structures that pulsed like a giant heart. Smaller vessels detached from its sides and began descending toward the planet's surface. Within minutes, 11 more bioships appeared around the first one. Jake counted the escort fighters that swarmed around the massive vessels like angry insects. There were hundreds of them, and each one was larger than Mary Crow Feather's atmospheric fighters. The Corvani had brought enough firepower to conquer a dozen human worlds. "They are jamming all colonial communication channels," Lisa reported as she monitored the electronic spectrum. "But they are not interfering with natural phenomena or traditional signaling methods." Jake smiled grimly. The aliens were so focused on advanced technology that they ignored simple things like smoke signals and mirror flashes. His people's communication network was still fully operational, while the colonial government was cut off from its military units. The first wave of Corvani landing craft touched down in the open fields around New Angeles. The vessels were as organic-looking as their motherships and seemed to grow roots into the soil as soon as they landed. Ramps opened like flower petals and alien warriors began pouring out. Through his binoculars, Jake got his first close look at their enemy. The Corvani were tall and thin with gray skin and long arms that ended in clawed hands. Their bioarmor looked like it had been grown directly onto their bodies and pulsed with internal lights. Each warrior carried weapons that seemed to be extensions of their own limbs, but it was the hunting beasts that truly worried Jake. These creatures were even larger than the one that had nearly killed Lisa, and they moved with predatory intelligence. Their crystal spines glowed with energy, and their claws could clearly cut through steel. The Corvani had brought dozens of them. "Colonial military is trying to respond," Lisa said as she monitored their tactical frequencies, "but their conventional weapons are barely scratching the bioarmor. The Corvani are cutting through their defensive lines like they are not even there." Jake watched the battle for New Angeles unfold with professional interest. The colonial forces fought bravely, but they were using standard military tactics against an enemy that was prepared for exactly that kind of response. Energy weapons bounced off adaptive armor, while projectile weapons were absorbed by bioshields that strengthened with each impact. Within 2 hours, the planetary capital was surrounded and most of Its military units had been destroyed or scattered. Corvani capture teams began moving through the city, taking prisoners for their experiments. Jake could hear screaming carried on the wind even from his position miles away. "Now we see if our preparation was worth the effort," he said, as he activated his communication device again. This time he sent the signal every native warrior on New Terra had been waiting for. The hunt was beginning. Mary Crowfeather's fighter squadron struck first. They came out of the sun with engines silent and weapons charged. Their modified aircraft were invisible to Corvani sensors until they opened fire at point-blank range. Plasma bolts designed with Lisa's biological enhancements tore through alien armor like it was paper. 6 Corvani fighters were destroyed in the first attack before the aliens even knew they were under assault. Mary's pilots scattered in 12 different directions and vanished back into the landscape before the enemy could organize a response. At the same time, Apache scouts began hitting Corvani ground patrols with poisoned arrows fired from positions that seemed to be empty air. The biological toxins Lisa had developed worked exactly as predicted. Alien bioarmor began dissolving within minutes of contact, leaving the warriors vulnerable to conventional weapons. Cherokee engineering teams triggered electromagnetic pulse devices that shut down Corvani communications in several sectors. Cut off from their command network, individual alien units began making tactical mistakes that native warriors were quick to exploit. But the most devastating attack came from an unexpected source. Jake had convinced several farming communities to evacuate through underground tunnels while leaving their automated systems running normally. When Corvani forces moved into what appeared to be occupied settlements, they triggered massive explosions that had been hidden in grain silos and storage buildings. The aliens had expected to face human military units using predictable tactics and conventional weapons. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Every shadow might hide a warrior with poisoned weapons. Every peaceful-looking farm might be a carefully prepared trap. "Their command frequencies are going crazy," Lisa reported as she monitored Corvani communications. "They are reporting casualties from attacks by invisible enemies using unknown weapons. Some units are claiming they are fighting human spirits that cannot be killed." Jake laughed despite the danger of their situation. "Psychological warfare was always one of our greatest weapons. Make the enemy afraid of shadows and they start making mistakes." On the tactical display, Lisa's equipment showed the Corvani response to these unexpected attacks. Instead of spreading out to hunt for hidden enemies, they were pulling their forces back into defensive formations around their landing sites. Their superior numbers were becoming a liability as thousands of warriors crowded together in easily targeted concentrations. "Billy Stone's teams are ready for the next phase," Jake said as he received a coded message. "When those bioships try to provide support fire for their ground forces, they are going to get a very unpleasant surprise." Lisa checked her chronometer. "The Corvani will need to establish orbital bombardment positions within the next hour if they want to break our defensive network before nightfall." Jake gathered his weapons and prepared to move to his next position. The real battle was just beginning, and he had a personal appointment with the Corvani commander who had ordered the torture of Lisa's colleagues. "You ready for this?" he asked Lisa as she packed up her equipment. She looked out at the smoke rising from New Angeles, where innocent people were being captured and prepared for alien experiments. "I have been ready since the moment I found my friends dead in that laboratory." Jake painted fresh war symbols on his face while Lisa checked the charge on her plasma weapon. Somewhere in the chaos below, a creature called Thrakmor. The render was directing the systematic destruction of human resistance. That creature was about to learn what happened when it made the mistake of threatening a Comanche warrior's family. 6 months after the Corvani invasion, Jake Running Wolf stood on the hill overlooking New Angeles and watched the city rebuilding itself. The scars of war were still visible in the damaged buildings and memorial gardens where the dead were honored, but life was returning to normal for the survivors. The alien bioships had fled New Terra's orbit within hours of Thrakmor's death. Without their command structure, the remaining Corvani forces had lost all coordination, and most had surrendered or been killed by native warriors who showed them no mercy. A few small groups had escaped into the wilderness, but they were being hunted down one by one. Lisa Martinez joined Jake on the hilltop carrying a data tablet filled with reports from across human space. Her limp had mostly healed, and she moved with the confident stride of someone who had survived combat and emerged stronger. In her other hand, she carried a traditional Comanche war lance that Jake had given her as a symbol of her adoption into his clan. The news from other colonies is getting better every day, she said as she sat beside him on the stone outcropping that had become their favorite meeting place. Word of what happened here has spread throughout human space. Other worlds are preparing proper defenses and the Corvani expansion has stopped completely. Jake nodded with satisfaction. Fear is a powerful weapon when used properly. Every alien species in this part of the galaxy now knows that humans are not easy prey. Below them in the valley they could see the construction of the new academy that would train future defenders of human colonies. The building combined traditional Native American architecture with the most advanced technology available. Students would learn both ancient warrior skills and modern scientific techniques in a curriculum designed by Lisa and the tribal elders working together. Governor Hamilton came by yesterday, Lisa said with amusement in her voice. He wanted to apologize again for not believing our warnings about the Corvani threat. Jake smiled grimly. Politicians always apologize after the fighting is over. What did you tell him? I told him that apologies are meaningless without changes in behavior. The colonial government is now required to include Native representatives in all defense planning and to respect traditional knowledge when making decisions about planetary security. This had been one of the most important victories to come from the war. For the first time since leaving Earth, the Native American tribes had been recognized as equal partners in colonial governance rather than primitive minorities to be managed by bureaucrats, Billy. Stone sent word from the orbital shipyards, Lisa continued. The first of the new hybrid fighters is ready for testing. Cherokee engineering combined with Lakota piloting skills should give us spacecraft that can outfight anything the aliens might send against us. Jake watched a group of children playing in the rebuilt streets below. Some were colonial kids and others were from native families, but they all played together, without thinking about their different backgrounds. The war had taught everyone on New Terra that they were all human, and that was what mattered when facing external threats. Mary Crow Feathers pilots are training colonial recruits in her new tactics, Lisa added. The hit-and-run strategies that worked so well against the Corvani are being taught to defense forces on 20 different worlds. This, too, was part of the victory. Traditional Native American warfare techniques that had been dismissed as outdated were now being studied by military academies throughout human space. Ancient wisdom combined with modern technology had proven more effective than conventional military doctrine. Joe Yazzie finished the communication network last week, Lisa said. Every human colony now has access to the same kind of signal system your people used to coordinate resistance during the invasion. No matter how advanced an enemy's technology, they will not be able to shut down methods that do not depend on electronics. Jake looked up at the sky where the first stars were becoming visible in the evening light. Somewhere out there were other alien species that might threaten human worlds in the future, but they would find Earth's children much better prepared than the Corvani had expected. There is something else, Lisa said quietly. The Xenobiology Institute wants to offer you a position as head of their new alien threat assessment program. They want someone who understands both traditional combat methods and alien psychology. Jake considered this offer carefully. He had never thought of himself as a scientist, but the war had taught him that knowledge was just another kind of weapon. Understanding your enemy was often more important than having superior firepower. Would I have to leave New Terra? He asked. The position would be based here but would involve travel to other colonies as needed. You would be teaching other worlds how to prepare defenses using the same methods that saved our planet. Jake thought about his grandfather's teachings and how they had helped him defeat an enemy with superior technology. Those lessons deserve to be shared with other human worlds that might face similar threats. I accept, he said, but only if you work with me as my partner. This victory belonged to both of us and any future work should be the same. Lisa smiled and touched the war paint symbols that were now permanently tattooed on her face. I was hoping you would say that. We make a good team. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set behind the mountains. In the growing darkness, signal fires began to appear on distant hilltops as the native settlements prepared for another peaceful night. The old ways of communication still worked perfectly and would always be ready if enemies came again. Do you think they will come back? Lisa asked. The Corvani or some other hostile species. Jake touched the handle of his grandfather's knife, which he would carry for the rest of his life. They will come. There are always predators who think they can prey on others without consequences, but when they do come, they will find us ready. He stood and helped Lisa to her feet. Our ancestors survived ice ages and plagues and genocides by adapting to threats and never giving up. We carry that same spirit in our blood no matter how far we travel among the stars. As they walked back toward the village, Jake felt the presence of his ancestors walking beside him. They had faced impossible odds with courage and cunning, and had passed those qualities down through generations of warriors. Now their descendant had proven that the same spirit could defeat enemies from other worlds. The lights of New Terra's settlements twinkled in the valley below like earthbound stars. Each light represented families who were safe because native warriors had remembered the old ways and combined them with new knowledge. The children playing in those homes would grow up knowing that humans were not victims to be preyed upon, but defenders who would fight for their freedom with whatever weapons they could forge in. The distance a wolf howled and was answered by others across the mountains. Jake smiled at the sound because he knew it was not really wolves. It was his people maintaining their watch over the land they had sworn to protect. The signals meant all was well and the night would pass peacefully. Lisa looked up at the stars and wondered what other threats might be lurking in the darkness between worlds. But she was no longer afraid because she had learned what Jake's people had known for centuries. Earth's children carried within themselves everything they needed to face any enemy that dared to threaten their homes. The war against the Corvani was over, but the greater struggle to protect human freedom among the stars had only begun. Jake Running Wolf and Lisa Martinez would be ready when that struggle called them again. They had learned to blend ancient wisdom with modern knowledge, and that combination had proven unstoppable. The victory belonged to all of Earth's children, but it had been won by those who remembered that courage and honor were more powerful than any technology. The galaxy had learned to respect humanity, and that respect had been earned with blood and sacrifice by warriors who refused to surrender. The hunt would continue as long as humans traveled among the stars, but they would never again face their enemies as helpless prey. They were the children of Earth, and they had inherited their ancestors' greatest gift, the unbreakable will to survive and protect their own. Jake Running Wolf ducked under the first hunting beast as it leaped toward him with claws extended. His tomahawk swept upward in a perfect arc and caught the creature across its throat. The plasma edge cut through bioarmor and alien flesh like it was paper. The beast's head separated from its body in a spray of purple blood. Thrackmore roared in fury as his prize hunting animal died. The massive alien commander raised his arm-mounted weapon and fired a stream of biological projectiles that exploded against the corridor walls where Jake had been standing a moment before. But Jake was no longer there. Using moves his grandfather had taught him, he rolled behind a support pillar and came up firing his bow. The first arrow struck Thrackmore in the shoulder where his armor was thinner. The biological toxin began eating through the alien's biosuit immediately. The second hunting beast circled around the pillar to flank Jake, but found itself facing the business end of a Comanche war lance, enhanced with targeting computers. The plasma tip punched through the creature's crystal spine and emerged from its chest. The beast collapsed with a sound like breaking glass. Impossible, Thrackmore snarled as he felt his shoulder armor dissolving. Human weapons cannot penetrate Corvani biosuits. Our armor adapts to any attack. Jake stepped into the open corridor with his grandfather's knife in his hand. The obsidian blade was coated with enough biological toxin to kill a dozen aliens. Your armor adapts to energy weapons and projectiles, but it cannot adapt to the toxins that plants develop to kill things that tried to eat them. The third hunting beast attacked from behind, but Jake had been listening to its breathing and footsteps. He spun and threw his knife in one smooth motion. The blade buried itself in the creature's eye, and the toxins went to work immediately. Within seconds, the beast's bioarmor was dissolving and its internal organs were shutting down. Thrackmore looked at his dead hunting animals with shock and growing fear. These creatures had been bred for maximum lethality and had never been defeated by human weapons before. How was one primitive warrior killing them so easily? You begin to understand, Jake said as he retrieved his knife and cleaned the alien blood from its blade. You are not fighting just me. You are fighting thousands of years of human experience in killing things that wanted to kill us first. The alien commander fired another volley of biological projectiles, but Jake was already moving. He used the laboratory equipment as cover while working his way closer to his target. Each piece of alien technology became a weapon in his hands as he turned their own equipment against them. A containment vessel full of acid samples shattered against Thrackmore's chest, sending caustic chemicals across his bioarmor. An experimental energy device exploded when Jake shot it with a plasma arrow, creating a shower of sparks that temporarily blinded the alien's optical sensors. "Stand still and die with honor," Thrackmore demanded as he tried to target the moving human. "Honor?" Jake replied as he leaped over an examination table. "You talk about honor after torturing helpless prisoners and experimenting on children. You know nothing about honor." The fourth hunting, Beast tried to corner Jake in the laboratory but found itself trapped among the human prisoners who had armed themselves with broken equipment and alien surgical tools. Led by a colonial farmer named Pete Johnson, the freed captives swarmed over the creature and brought it down through sheer numbers and desperate courage. Jake used the distraction to close the distance with Thrackmore. His tomahawk sparked against the alien's arm-mounted weapon, while his free hand drove a toxin-coated arrowhead into his enemy's thigh. More bioarmor began dissolving as the plant-derived chemicals went to work. "Your people should have stayed on your own worlds," Jake said as he pressed his attack. "But you came here thinking humans were weak and easy prey. Now you learn what happens when you threaten our families." Thrackmore backed away as his bioarmor continued to fail. Without its protection, he was still larger and stronger than Jake, but no longer invulnerable. "We are a superior species. Humans are nothing but test subjects for our research." Jake's answer was a diagonal slash that opened the alien's chest from shoulder to hip. Purple blood flowed freely as Thrackmore's internal organs were exposed to the toxins coating Jake's weapons. "Lisa Martinez and her colleagues were not test subjects," Jake said as he circled his wounded enemy. "They were human beings with families and friends who loved them. You killed them for your entertainment." The alien commander tried one final desperate attack, launching himself at Jake with claws extended and bioweapons firing. But Jake had been waiting for this moment. He dropped to one knee and drove his grandfather's knife upward with all his strength. The obsidian blade penetrated Thrackmore's chest just below the sternum and slid between his ribs to pierce his primary heart. The toxin coating worked, instantly causing the alien's bioarmor to collapse completely as his circulatory system shut down. Thrackmore looked down at the primitive weapon protruding from his chest with disbelief. "How is this possible? You are nothing but a savage with stone tools." Jake twisted the knife and felt his enemy's life fading away. This savage learned from his ancestors how to kill monsters that thought they were superior to humans. "You are just the latest in a long line of creatures that made that mistake." The alien commander collapsed as his biosystems failed completely. His massive body hit the floor with a sound like falling rocks, and Jake stood over him with blood on his weapons and victory in his heart. Around the laboratory, the freed human prisoners were gathering alien equipment and preparing to escape. Pete Johnson approached Jake with respect in his eyes. "Are you really Comanche?" the farmer asked. Jake wiped the alien blood from his knife and sheathed it beside his ancestors' weapons. "I am Jake Running Wolf. My people have been killing monsters for thousands of years. This one just happened to come from another planet." Lisa Martinez appeared in the doorway with her plasma weapon in her hands and tears streaming down her face. Behind her came Billy Stone and several Cherokee warriors who had fought their way through the facility's outer defenses. "Is it over?" she asked as she looked at Thrackmore's corpse. Jake activated his communication device and sent the victory signal to all native settlements across New Terra. The hunting beasts were dead and their master had paid the price for his crimes with his life. "It is finished," he replied. "The creature that ordered your friends' deaths has faced Comanche justice. The spirits of the murdered can rest in peace." Lisa knelt beside Thrackmore's body and activated her scanner. Without their command structure, the remaining Corvani forces will lose coordination. Their bioships need constant communication with field commanders to maintain operational effectiveness. Billy Stone was already working on the alien communication equipment. "If we can broadcast the news of their leader's death, it should cause panic among their remaining forces. Leaderless troops are much easier to defeat." Jake looked around the laboratory where so much suffering had taken place. The equipment that had tortured innocent humans now lay scattered and broken. The alien commander, who had thought humans were nothing but test subjects, was dead by weapons his people had used for centuries. "Let every Corvani on this planet know what happened here," Jake said as he painted fresh war symbols on his face with his enemy's blood. Let them know that Jake Running Wolf of the Comanche Nation has avenged the innocent dead. Let them know that humans are not prey animals to be experimented upon. He raised his grandfather's tomahawk toward the ceiling and spoke the ancient words his people used to honor fallen warriors. The blood debt has been paid. The hunt is complete. Jake Running Wolf moved through the ruined streets of New Angeles like a ghost seeking vengeance. 3 days had passed since the Corvani invasion began, and the city had become a nightmare of alien occupation. Capture teams roamed the neighborhoods taking prisoners while hunting beasts prowled for any humans trying to hide or escape. But Jake was not hiding. He was hunting. Lisa Martinez had used her scientific knowledge and captured alien equipment to track the location of Thrackmore the Render. The Corvani commander had established his base in the former Colonial Research Center, where he could continue his experiments on captured humans using the same equipment Lisa's team had once used for peaceful studies. Jake paused in the shadow of a burned-out building and checked his weapons. His grandfather's tomahawk now hummed with plasma energy, while his bow could fire arrows guided by targeting computers. Most importantly, his knife had been coated with the biological toxin that would dissolve Corvani bioarmor on contact. Around his neck, he wore a necklace of small metal discs. Each disc represented a Corvani warrior he had killed during the past 3 days of guerrilla warfare. There were 17 discs now, and Jake planned to add many more before his hunt was finished. The research center stood 6 blocks away through streets patrolled by alien guards and their hunting beasts. Jake had been studying their patrol patterns for hours and had identified the best route to reach his target. But first he needed to rescue any human prisoners who might still be alive in the facility's lower levels. He activated his communication device and sent a brief coded message to Mary Crowfeather's fighter squadron. In 30 minutes, they would create a distraction by attacking the Corvani landing fields on the far side of the city. That should draw some of the guards away from the research center. Jake began moving through the debris-filled streets with the silent steps his grandfather had taught him. Every shadow was his friend, and every sound was information about enemy positions. The Corvani made too much noise with their heavy bioarmor, and their hunting beasts were focused on scent trails rather than visual detection. He reached the first checkpoint without being seen. 2 Corvani guards stood beside a barrier made of organic material that pulsed with alien life. Their weapons were integrated into their armor and could fire energy bolts or biological projectiles depending on what kind of target they faced. Jake drew his bow and nocked an arrow, tipped with concentrated plant toxins. The first guard died without making a sound as the biological weapon dissolved his armor and penetrated his chest. The second guard had just enough time to turn toward his fallen companion before Jake's second arrow found its mark. Both aliens collapsed as their bioarmor failed completely. Jake quickly dragged their bodies into the shadows and took their communication devices. Lisa had taught him how to access Corvani equipment using their own biometric scanners. The tactical display showed him the locations of other guard posts and patrol routes throughout the research center. Most importantly, it revealed the layout of the underground laboratories, where human prisoners were being held for experimentation. Jake moved deeper into the facility using maintenance corridors that the aliens had not bothered to seal. The Corvani were overconfident in their technology and did not expect humans to use simple infiltration techniques that required no advanced equipment. The first laboratory he found contained equipment that made his stomach turn. Examination tables were stained with human blood, and alien surgical tools lay scattered across metal surfaces. Computer displays showed biological data that could only have come from live experiments on unwilling subjects. But the laboratory was empty of prisoners. Jake checked the Corvani tactical display and saw that most of the human captives were being held 3 levels deeper in the facility's maximum security section. He descended through ventilation shafts that were too narrow for Corvani warriors, but perfect for a human with traditional wilderness training. The aliens had excellent technology, but they lacked the basic field skills that every Native American child learned before reaching adulthood. The sounds of suffering reached his ears long before he could see the source. Human voices crying in pain and terror echoed through the metal corridors while alien voices discussed experimental procedures with clinical detachment. Jake emerged from the ventilation system in a storage room filled with biological samples in containment vessels. Through the transparent walls he could see tissue samples and preserved organs that had clearly been removed from human subjects. The Corvani were studying human anatomy with the thoroughness of scientists and the cruelty of butchers. The main laboratory was visible through reinforced windows. Inside, Jake could see 20 human prisoners strapped to examination tables while Corvani researchers performed procedures that were designed to cause maximum pain while keeping the subjects alive and conscious. Among the prisoners, Jake recognized several faces from the missing persons reports that had been filed before the invasion. These people had been captured weeks ago and had been suffering in alien laboratories ever since. Some showed signs of surgical procedures that had been performed without anesthesia or proper medical care. Jake felt the warrior rage of his ancestors rising in his chest like fire. These creatures had turned human beings into laboratory animals for their twisted research. They would pay for every moment of suffering they had caused. He checked his weapons and prepared to assault the laboratory when movement in the corridor caught his attention. A massive figure in elaborate bioarmor was approaching, flanked by 4 hunting beasts. Even through the distortion of the alien armor, Jake could see that this creature was larger and more dangerous than any Corvani he had encountered. The tactical display on his stolen communication device identified the figure as Thrackmore the Render, the alien commander who had ordered the torture of Lisa's colleagues and the deaths of hundreds of innocent colonists, was finally within reach of Comanche justice. Jake activated a small, explosive device Billy Stone had provided and placed it against the laboratory's main power coupling. In 60 seconds, the blast would shut down all the containment fields and life support systems, giving the human prisoners a chance to escape during the confusion. Then he stepped into the corridor to face his enemy. Thrackmore was even more massive than Jake had expected. The alien commander stood nearly 8 feet tall, and his bioarmor was covered with spines and organic weapons that pulsed with internal energy. His hunting beasts flanked him like loyal dogs, each one capable of killing a dozen humans without effort. "So," Thrackmore said in accented English as his translator device activated, "the primitive who has been killing my warriors finally shows himself. You are smaller than I expected for one who has caused so much trouble." Jake drew his grandfather's tomahawk and felt its plasma edge activate. "I am Jake Running Wolf of the Comanche Nation. You killed my friend's colleagues and tortured innocent people for your experiments. Today you answer for those crimes." The alien commander laughed with a sound like grinding metal. "Your friend the scientist provided us with very useful data before she escaped." Her companion screamed most entertainingly as we tested our biological weapons on their living bodies. "Soon you will join them on my examination tables." Jake felt his ancestors watching as he prepared for the most important fight of his life. "The only thing you will find on your tables is your own corpse." The explosion behind them lit up the corridor as the laboratory's systems failed. Emergency alarms began wailing while human prisoners stumbled free from their restraints. In the chaos, Jake saw his chance and attacked. The hunt for vengeance had finally begun. Jake Running Wolf moved through the thick forest like his grandfather had taught him. Every step was quiet and careful. His dark eyes watched the ground for tracks and broken branches. Blood drops on the leaves showed him which way the wounded animal had gone. The morning sun filtered through the tall trees of New Terra Colony. This planet was far from Earth, but it felt like home to Jake and his people. The Comanche had come here 50 years ago to keep their old ways alive while still using new technology. Jake wore traditional leather clothes, but his knife had a plasma edge and his bow shot energy arrows. He had been tracking this creature for 3 hours. The blood trail was getting heavier, which meant the animal was getting weaker. Jake hoped to find it soon so he could end its suffering and bring meat back to his village. The trail led him to a small clearing where something had crashed through the trees. Jake stopped and crouched low. His hand moved to his knife handle. The forest was too quiet here. No birds sang and no insects buzzed. Something was very wrong. He moved forward slowly and saw the crash site. A small metal pod had smashed into the ground, leaving a deep crater. Pieces of twisted metal were scattered everywhere. Smoke still rose from the wreckage. This was not from his world. Next to the crashed pod lay the biggest creature Jake had ever seen. It looked like a giant bear but had crystal spines growing from its back. Purple blood pooled around its massive body. The beast was easily twice the size of any earth bear. Its claws were as long as Jake's forearm and looked sharp enough to cut through steel. Jake had never seen anything like this creature. It was not from New Terra. The colonists had mapped all the dangerous animals on this planet, and this thing was not in any of their books. Where had it come from, and why was it here? He walked around the dead beast carefully. His bow was ready in case the creature was not really dead, but its eyes were empty and its chest did not move. Whatever had killed this monster had done it well. That was when Jake heard the sound. It was quiet, but his trained ears caught it. Someone was breathing under the dead creature. Someone human. Jake dropped his bow and grabbed the crystal spines on the creature's back. He pulled with all his strength, but the beast was too heavy. He looked around and found a long piece of metal from the crashed pod. Using it as a lever, he managed to lift the creature's massive arm. Underneath was a woman. She was young with dark hair and brown skin. Her clothes were torn and bloody, but she was alive. Her chest moved up and down slowly. In her hand, she clutched a small device that blinked with tiny lights. Jake pulled her free from under the creature. She was unconscious and had many cuts on her arms and face. Her left leg was bent in a way that meant it was broken, but she was breathing and her heart was beating. He could save her. He lifted the woman carefully and started walking back toward his village. She was heavier than she looked, but Jake was strong from years of hunting. As he walked, he wondered who she was and where she had come from. The crashed pod and the dead creature told him this was more than just a simple accident. The device in her hand kept blinking. Jake could see numbers and symbols on its small screen, but he could not read them. It looked like the kind of technology the science teams used. Maybe this woman was from one of the research stations. After an hour of walking, Jake reached his village. His lodge sat at the edge of the settlement near the river. It was built in the old style with wooden poles and buffalo hide, but had modern medical equipment inside that his people had learned to use. Jake laid the woman on his bed and activated the medical scanner. The machine hummed quietly as it examined her injuries. The screen showed that she had a broken leg, cracked ribs, and a concussion. She was hurt badly, but not dying. He cleaned her wounds with antiseptic and set her broken leg in a healing cast. The medical unit would help her bones mend faster than they would naturally. Then he covered her with warm blankets and waited. While she slept, Jake examined the device she had been holding. When he touched its surface, it came alive with light. Text scrolled across the screen, but it was in scientific language he could not understand. There were pictures of the dead creature and other monsters he had never seen before. One image made his blood run cold. It showed humans in cages being experimented on by tall alien figures. The aliens had long arms and gray skin. They wore armor that looked like it was grown rather than made. In their hands were tools that Jake knew were meant to cause pain. More images showed burning buildings and dead bodies. These were not from New Terra, but they looked like human colonies. Someone had attacked these places and killed many people. The device held proof of terrible crimes. Jake heard the woman stirring on his bed. She opened her eyes slowly and looked around with confusion. When she saw Jake, she tried to sit up quickly, but pain made her fall back down. "Where am I?" she asked in a weak voice. "You are safe," Jake told her. "I found you under a dead creature in the forest. You were hurt badly, but you will live." The woman looked at her bandaged arms and the cast on her leg. Then she saw the device in Jake's hands and her eyes went wide with fear. "You must not touch that," she said, trying to reach for it. "It contains information that could get us all killed." "The pictures I saw," Jake said carefully. "The experiments on humans. The dead colonies. What does this mean?" The woman stared at him for a long moment. Tears started running down her face. "My name is Lisa Martinez. I am a scientist from Meridian Base. 3 days ago, we discovered something horrible. The aliens who call themselves peaceful explorers are really killers, and they are coming here next." Jake felt his warrior instincts awakening. His people had faced genocide before in Earth's history. He would not let it happen again on New Terra. "Tell me everything," he said. The meeting with Governor Hamilton had gone exactly as Jake expected. The colonial leader sat behind his massive desk in the Capitol building of New Angeles and listened to their story with obvious disbelief. Even with Lisa showing him the data files and explaining her scientific credentials, Hamilton remained skeptical. "Dr. Martinez," the governor had said in his smooth politician voice, "I understand you have been through a traumatic experience and I sympathize with the loss of your colleagues. But these claims about the Corvani are simply impossible to believe. They have been model partners in our research programs." Lisa had tried to show him the evidence of experiments on human prisoners, but Hamilton waved it away. "Computer files can be faked and images can be manipulated. Without physical proof, I cannot authorize planetary defense measures based on accusations alone. When Jake tried to speak about the missing settlements, Hamilton dismissed him entirely. Mr. Running Wolf, I appreciate your concern for your people. But you must understand that colonial administration requires facts, not tribal superstitions. That comment had made Jake's hand move to his knife handle, but Lisa quickly stepped between them. They left the governor's office with nothing accomplished except confirming what Jake already knew. The colonial government would not help them. Now Jake stood in the sacred canyon where his people held their war councils. Torches burned in a circle around the ancient gathering place, and tribal leaders from across New Terra sat in the traditional formation. The Comanche elders were flanked by Cherokee engineers, Lakota pilots, Navajo technicians, Apache scouts, and representatives from a dozen other tribes. Chief Robert Gray Eagle of the Lakota spoke first. The colonial government has abandoned us as they always do when trouble comes. We must rely on ourselves and each other as our ancestors did. Jake stood and faced the assembled warriors. The enemy comes with superior numbers and advanced weapons. But they make the same mistake that armies have made when fighting our people for centuries. They think technology alone will give them victory. He gestured to Lisa, who sat beside the fire with her data device. This woman risked her life to bring us intelligence about our enemy. She has shown us their weapons and their plans. Most importantly, she has shown us their weaknesses. Lisa activated the device and projected holographic images into the center of the circle. The assembled warriors studied the Corvani bioships and ground forces with professional interest. Their armor is grown rather than manufactured, she explained. It can adapt to energy weapons and projectile impacts, but it has trouble with certain biological compounds. Plants that evolved alongside human settlements produce toxins that their bioarmor cannot neutralize. Chief Mary Standing Bear of the Cherokee leaned forward. What kinds of plants? Poison oak, stinging nettle, and several varieties of mushrooms that grow in our agricultural areas. If we can process these toxins properly, they could be used to coat weapons or create area denial systems. Billy Stone nodded thoughtfully. My engineering teams can extract and concentrate these compounds. We have the equipment to coat arrows and spear points with biological agents. What about their numbers? Asked Captain Tom Blackhorse of the Apache Scouts. Even with poisoned weapons, we cannot fight 12,000 warriors in open battle. Jake smiled grimly. We do not fight them in open battle. We fight them the way Geronimo fought the cavalry, and the way our ancestors fought superior enemies for generations. We use the land itself as our weapon. He activated a holographic map of New Terra showing the locations of all native settlements. Every village will become a fortress. We use natural camouflage enhanced with modern technology to make our positions invisible from orbit. When the enemy lands, we let them think they face only scattered resistance. And then, Chief Gray Eagle asked. Then we teach them about Native American warfare, Jake replied. Hit and run attacks, ambushes, psychological warfare. We make them afraid to leave their landing sites. We turn their superior numbers into a disadvantage by forcing them to spread out looking for us. Lisa studied the tactical display with growing understanding. You want to fragment their forces. Make them chase ghosts through terrain you know better than they do. Exactly, Jake confirmed. But we need more than just traditional tactics. We need to combine our old ways with new technology in ways they will never expect. Joe Yazzie stood up. My technical teams have been working on that problem. We can modify our traditional weapons with plasma cores and energy fields. Arrows that can penetrate bioarmor. Tomahawks that cut through alien metal. Spears guided by targeting computers. Mary Crowfeather added her own contribution. My pilots can modify our aircraft for stealth operations. Hit their supply lines and command posts, then disappear before they can respond. We make them think they are fighting an enemy 10 times larger than we really are. Jake looked around the circle at these leaders who were preparing to fight impossible odds with courage and ingenuity. There is something else we need to discuss. Lisa has shown us that the Corvani take prisoners for experiments. We cannot let them capture any of our people alive. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Every warrior in the circle knew what Jake meant. They had all heard the stories of what happened to their ancestors in military prisons and government schools. Death was preferable to what the Corvani would do to captured humans. Each village will have emergency protocols, Chief Standing Bear said quietly. If defeat is certain, our people will not be taken alive. Lisa felt tears in her eyes as she understood what these people were willing to sacrifice to protect their freedom. There might be another way, The data I recovered shows that Corvani bioships need constant communication with their home fleet to function properly. If we could disrupt their command network. Billy Stone's eyes lit up with possibility. A coordinated electromagnetic pulse could shut down their communications temporarily, long enough for our people to escape or counterattack. Can we generate that kind of pulse? Jake asked. Not with conventional equipment, Billy admitted. But if we sacrifice some of our power generation systems and coordinate the discharge properly, we might be able to create localized dead zones. Chief Gray Eagle stood and raised his war staff. Then we have our strategy. Each settlement prepares hidden fortifications. Our warriors arm themselves with hybrid weapons. Our technical specialists prepare electronic warfare capabilities. When the enemy comes, we will be ready. Jake walked to the center of the circle and knelt beside the sacred fire. He took out a small pot of paint made from traditional materials mixed with nanotechnology that would enhance his natural abilities. With careful strokes, he painted his face with the war symbols of his clan. I claim the right of personal vengeance against the leader of our enemies, he announced. The creature that ordered the torture of innocents and the death of this woman's friends will face Comanche justice. One by one, the other warriors came forward and painted their own faces with the war symbols of their tribes. Lisa watched this ancient ritual and felt something stirring in her heart that she had never experienced before. These people were not just preparing to fight. They were preparing to become something larger than themselves. What can I do to help? She asked. Jake looked at her with respect. You have already done more than enough. But if you are willing, there is one more thing we need. Anything. Help us turn your scientific knowledge into weapons the Corvani will never expect. Show us how to fight an enemy that thinks they understand everything about human capabilities. Lisa stood carefully on her healing leg and walked to the fire. She dipped her fingers in the paint. Podden marked her own face with symbols that had no tribal meaning but represented her commitment to this fight. The Corvani think humans are just test subjects for their experiments, she said to the assembled warriors. Let us show them what happens when the test subjects fight back. The War Council cheered, and Jake knew that New Terra would not fall without a fight that would be remembered across the galaxy. The Corvani were about to face an enemy they had never encountered before. They were about to face the combined fury of Earth's children fighting for their homes. Jake Running Wolf stood at the edge of his village as the morning sun painted the sky red. In his hands he held an ancient signal mirror that had belonged to his great-grandfather. The polished metal caught the sunlight and sent flashes across the valley to the next Comanche settlement 15 miles away. 3 flashes meant danger was coming. 5 flashes meant gather the War Council. 7 flashes meant prepare for battle. Jake sent the complete message twice to make sure it was received, then waited for the response. Within minutes, answering flashes came from the distant hilltop. The message was being passed from village to village across New Terra. Soon every Native American settlement on the planet would know that enemies approached, and it was time to prepare for war. Lisa Martinez watched from Jake's lodge where she was still recovering from her injuries. Her leg was healing faster than normal human bones would thanks to the Comanche medical technology, but she was still weak. She had protested when Jake told her his plan to warn the tribes instead of going to the colonial government first. The governor has authority over all the settlements, she had argued. He controls the planetary defense forces and the military bases. If we can convince him to believe us, he could evacuate the vulnerable colonies and prepare proper defenses. But Jake knew better. He had dealt with colonial bureaucrats before and knew they would never listen to a Comanche hunter and an injured scientist. They would want committees and meetings and official reports that would take weeks to complete. By then, the Corvani would already be burning cities and capturing prisoners for their experiments. The first to arrive was Billy Stone from the Cherokee engineering clan. He rode an electric horse that moved silently through the forest paths. Billy was young but brilliant with technology and had helped design many of the defensive systems that protected native settlements from wild animals and harsh weather. Jake, my friend, Billy said as he dismounted, your message has reached every tribe from here to the northern mountains. The war chiefs are coming, but they want to know what enemy we face. Jake led Billy into his lodge where Lisa was sitting up in bed with the data device on her lap. She looked up at the Cherokee engineer with hope in her eyes. Finally, someone else would hear the truth about the Corvani threat. Billy Stone, Jake said. This is Lisa Martinez. She is a scientist who discovered something terrible about the Aliens the colonial government thinks are peaceful explorers. Lisa activated the device and showed Billy the same files she had shown Jake. The Cherokee engineer studied the images of experiments and weapons with growing anger on his face. As a technical expert, he understood better than most how advanced and dangerous the Corvani technology was. These bioships, Billy said, pointing to schematics on the screen. They are not just spacecraft. They are living weapons that can adapt and change during battle. Our conventional defenses would be almost useless against them. Almost useless, Jake repeated, but not completely useless. Billy smiled grimly. Native ingenuity has always found ways to fight superior enemies. Give me a few days and I can modify our defensive systems to at least slow them down. More tribal representatives arrived throughout the day. Mary Crow Feather came from the Lakota Flying Corps that protected the sky above native territories. She was the best pilot on New Terra and commanded a squadron of modified atmospheric fighters that could operate in space if necessary. How many ships are we talking about? Mary asked after Lisa showed her the Corvani fleet data. 12 bioships with escort fighters, Lisa replied. Each bioship can carry over 1,000 warriors plus their hunting beasts and support equipment. Mary nodded thoughtfully. My fighters are fast and heavily armed, but we only have 43 operational aircraft. In a straight fight, we would be outnumbered 30-1. Then we do not fight straight, Jake said. We fight like our ancestors did. We use the land and our knowledge of it to make the enemy come to us on our terms. Joe Yazzie arrived last. The Navajo technology specialist had traveled the farthest and brought news from the northern settlements. The message has reached every tribe, he reported. The war councils are forming and supplies are being gathered. But there is other news you need to hear. Jake and the others waited while Joe caught his breath. 3 colonial settlements have gone dark in the past week. No radio contact and no response to emergency signals. The colonial government says it is just equipment failures, but the pattern matches what this scientist described. Lisa felt her heart sink. They are already here. The Corvani must have advanced scouts taking prisoners and testing their weapons before the main fleet arrives. Where are these settlements? Jake asked. Joe consulted a map display on his tablet. Red Creek Valley, Haven Ridge, and Prosperity Falls. All of them are remote farming communities with no military presence. Jake studied the map and saw the pattern immediately. The 3 settlements formed a triangle around the largest colonial city on the continent. They are surrounding New Angeles. When their fleet arrives, they plan to cut off all escape routes and trap the population. We have to warn Governor Hamilton, Lisa insisted. Even if he does not believe us completely, he has to investigate these missing settlements. Jake nodded. Billy, can you get a message through to the colonial capital? The Cherokee engineer activated his communication equipment and tried to establish contact with New Angeles. After several minutes, he shook his head. All official channels are being blocked or monitored. If the Corvani have infiltrators in the government, they would know about any warning we try to send. Then we go in person, Jake decided. Mary, can your aircraft reach New Angeles? In 4 hours if we push the engines, the Lakota pilot replied. But if the Corvani have scouts in orbit, they might shoot us down before we can land. Lisa struggled to stand despite her injuries. I have to try. Governor Hamilton knows me from my research reports. He might listen if I explain what we found at the Corvani base. Jake helped steady her on her feet. Your leg is not healed enough for this kind of travel. The stress could cause permanent damage. Then I will walk with a limp for the rest of my life, Lisa said firmly. But I will not let those monsters kill innocent people because I was too afraid to take a risk. The native leaders looked at each other, and Jake could see respect growing in their eyes. This colonial scientist was proving herself worthy of their trust and protection. If we are going to do this, we need to do it right, Billy said. Joe can modify Mary's fighter to block Corvani sensors. I can prepare emergency communication equipment that will broadcast our warning to every settlement on the planet simultaneously. And if Governor Hamilton still does not believe us? Mary asked. Jake picked up his grandfather's war axe and checked its plasma-enhanced edge. Then we come back here and prepare to fight alone. Our people have survived genocide before by refusing to give up. We can do it again. Lisa looked around at these 4 Native Americans who were willing to risk everything to protect their world. She thought about her dead colleagues and the hundreds of missing colonists who had been tortured in Corvani laboratories. The aliens thought humans were weak and primitive creatures who could be easily conquered. They were about to Learn how wrong they were. When do we leave? She asked. Jake looked out his window at the signal fires that were now burning on every hilltop across the valley. The tribes were awakening and preparing for war. Soon every native settlement would be a fortress ready to defend itself against any enemy. Tonight, he said, under cover of darkness like warriors should. Lisa Martinez tried to sit up again despite the pain in her ribs. Jake helped her lean against the wooden headboard of his bed. She looked around his lodge and saw the mix of old and new that defined Comanche life on New Terra. Traditional, weapons hung next to energy rifles and healing. Herbs sat beside medical scanners. How long have I been unconscious? She asked. 2 days, Jake replied. You had a bad head injury. The medical unit says you need more rest, but your body is healing well. Lisa nodded, but her eyes stayed focused on the data device. I need to show you what we found. But first you must promise me something. If I die, you must get this information to someone who can use it. The lives of everyone on New Terra depend on it. Jake sat down in a chair next to the bed. I promise. But you are not going to die. Now tell me about these aliens. Lisa took the device from his hands and activated it with her fingerprint. The screen came alive with files and folders full of information. She opened the first folder and Jake saw pictures of tall gray aliens with long arms and strange armor. These are the Corvani, Lisa said. 6 months ago they arrived in our solar system. They said they were peaceful explorers who wanted to study our planets and learn about human culture. The colonial government welcomed them and gave them permission to set up research stations. She opened another folder that showed images of Corvani bases. The structures looked like they had been grown rather than built. They curved and twisted like living things and had a sickly organic appearance that made Jake uncomfortable. At first everything seemed normal, Lisa continued. The Corvani were polite and seemed genuinely interested in our science and culture. They shared some of their technology with us, and our researchers were excited to learn from such an advanced species. Jake watched as Lisa opened more files. These showed human scientists working alongside Corvani researchers. Everyone looked happy and peaceful. But Jake noticed something in the aliens' eyes that made him uneasy. They looked at the humans the way a hunter looks at prey. What changed? Jake asked. Lisa's face became grim. 3 weeks ago, my research team was studying alien plant samples in the Corvani base near Meridian Station. I was working late when I heard screaming from the lower levels. I went to investigate and found something that will give me nightmares for the rest of my life. She opened a new folder, and Jake saw images that made his stomach turn. Humans were strapped to tables while Corvani scientists performed experiments on them. The victims were clearly in terrible pain, and many showed signs of surgical procedures that had been done without proper care. They were testing biological weapons on captured colonists, Lisa said with tears in her eyes. The Corvani had been taking people from remote settlements for months. Families reported missing relatives, but the colonial government always said they had just moved to other planets or gotten lost in the wilderness. Jake felt anger building in his chest like a fire. How many people did they take? We found records of over 300 missing colonists. Men, women, and children from dozens of settlements. The Corvani were testing different toxins and diseases to see how human bodies would react. They were developing weapons designed specifically to kill our species. Lisa opened another file that showed maps of human colonies throughout this part of space. Red marks covered many of the settlements, and Jake realized what they meant. They have done this before, he said. Yes, Lisa whispered. We found evidence that the Corvani have wiped out at least 12 human colonies in the past 5 years. They always follow the same pattern. First, they arrive as peaceful explorers. Then they study the local population and capture test subjects. Finally, they deploy their biological weapons and take over the planet for themselves. Jake stood up and walked to his window. Outside, he could see his village going about their daily activities. Children played by the river while their parents worked in gardens and workshops. These people trusted him to keep them safe, and he would not fail them. What happened at your research station? He asked. Lisa closed her eyes and took a deep breath. My colleague Sam Parker discovered encrypted files on a Corvani computer. The files contained their real plan for New Terra. They have been developing a virus that will make humans docile and easy to control. Once they release it into our atmosphere, the entire population will become like sheep. She opened the final folder, and Jake saw technical diagrams of weapons and delivery systems. The Corvani had planned every detail of their attack with scientific precision. Sam tried to copy the files, but the Corvani security system detected the intrusion. Alarms started going off throughout the base. Sam told me to run while he destroyed their computer systems. I grabbed what data I could and headed for the emergency pods. Lisa's voice broke as she continued. The Corvani released their hunting beasts to catch us before we could escape. I saw them tear Sam apart right in front of me. Dr. Helen Cross tried to help him, but they killed her too. 12 good people died because we discovered the truth. Jake turned back to face her. But you escaped. Barely. I made it to an escape pod and launched before the beasts could reach me. But one of them followed my pod down to the planet's surface. It was faster and stronger than anything I had ever seen. When my pod crashed, the creature was waiting for me. How did you kill it? Jake asked. Lisa held up a small weapon that looked like a metal tube. Experimental plasma cutter. I managed to get one shot before it knocked me down. The beam went right through its heart, but the creature's body fell on top of me. I thought I was going to die trapped under that thing. Jake picked up the plasma cutter and examined it. The weapon was small, but he could feel the power contained within its metal casing. This could be useful. There is something else you need to know, Lisa said. The Corvani fleet is already on its way here. According to the files, they will arrive within the next week. They have 12 bioships carrying thousands of warriors and hunting beasts. Jake felt his warrior blood awakening fully now. His ancestors had faced impossible odds before, and survived through courage and cunning. He would not let these aliens destroy his people without a fight. The colonial government must be warned, he said. Lisa shook her head. They will not believe us. Governor Hamilton thinks the Corvani are peaceful allies. Even if we could convince him the colonial military is not strong enough to fight bioships. Jake walked to his weapon rack and took down his grandfather's war axe. The ancient steel blade gleamed in the light from the medical scanner. His people had their own ways of fighting enemies who thought they were superior. Then we will have to stop them ourselves.